Good morning. Last night at dinner, our fearless leader, Bridgett Wagner, shared with us a sign from World War II history, not the one that you may be thinking of, keep calm and carry on, but one that says, freedom is in peril, defend it with all your might. And I love that sentiment because it talks about the stakes and what must be done in response. But I'm the father of a 5-year-old boy and a 2-year-old boy, and so I need to speak in a little bit simpler terms. And so 3 or 4 weeks ago, a lovely neighbor of ours was cleaning out her attic, and she found 2 wooden swords and 2 wooden shields that she gifted to my boys. Now, if you are a Binion boy, the greatest gift you can be given is a weapon that you are allowed to use. And I'll never give them a gift that will top these swords. But anyway, they're playing with these swords, and I had this epiphany. I said, I know what I'll do. I'll show them the Braveheart speech so that they can pretend to be William Wallace while they're playing with these wooden swords. And my wife also agreed this was a genius idea. And so we played the video, and now for the last month, I've been treated about once a day, twice a day. I'll be sitting in a quiet room, and in will run my 5-year-old, sometimes in nothing more than his underwear, and he'll say, Dad, they may take our lives, but they may never take our freedom. And so my 5-year-old son, he understands the stakes of the battle we're in. And so as I introduce our great speakers, I think of them as the William Wallace of the House Republican Conference, in a place where most people would prefer that you take their freedom than their invitation to the cocktail party. Congresswoman Cammack and Congressman Chip Roy are genuine fighters. They understand what the stakes are, and they understand what must be done. They are self-sacrificing individuals. They have been through life's challenges. Chip Roy is a cancer survivor. Kat Cammack has taken just about everything life can throw at you, and they have gone through those crucibles and decided to serve the public in a way that few in Washington do. So come on up to the stage. Welcome. My cousin. We're all family in the conservative movement. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Resource Bank. Thanks for having us in Texas. Why don't we get started? We're talking this morning about the battle lines are drawn, and boy, have the battle lines been drawn. Paint us a picture. Tell us what it's like in Washington. What are the fights that are most important?
Oh, well, awesome to see everybody here today. See, these are challenges that nobody talks about. I know we have some really, really tough ones. This is my first challenge. I'm 5'3". So I'm like the small child up here who can't even touch the ground. So if I'm adjusting, it's because I'm really short with little T-Rex arms and challenges that you don't have.
I've got plenty of other challenges.
Okay, so, big question. Challenges that we have in Washington. Really, honestly, too many to list. But when I think about this at a 30,000-foot level, I'm coming at this from the perspective of somebody who just 10 years ago was homeless. I'm looking at this from the perspective of somebody who went to the Naval War College and thinks of situations. It could be, how do we tackle a home project to how do we get a piece of legislation passed? I think of it from a war military strategy lens, right? So I'm thinking we have multiple fronts that we're fighting right now. This is a very Clausewitz type of scenario. You have the war on culture. You have the war on religion. You have the fight in education. You have the fight that we're having in Congress legislatively, the corporate fight, which Andy last night spoke to so eloquently about the wokeism in corporate America. We have multiple fronts. I think the biggest challenge for us as conservatives is, one, getting united behind one spear and really tackling that next challenge. The second part is opening up a front on them. It's not enough for us to constantly just be nitpicking and taking pot shots here and there. That's not going to get us where we need to be. I think we need to actually start thinking about how do we open up a second front or a third front on the left. That's where we need to be going. And then from my perspective, again, it's pretty shameful that I'm the youngest Republican woman in Congress. And if come the 118th Congress, I'm still the youngest Republican woman, then I haven't done my job. We need to build that next generation of conservatives. And I think it starts with telling our story, because every single person in this room has an incredible background. Chip has an incredible background. But people don't know that. They don't know why we are who we are and why we believe in the things we do. It's because, let's face it, conservatives, we're very data-driven. We're about the statistics and the data. We're not about the heart. We're not about the feels. We need to start speaking to the hearts, and it starts with telling our story. So a lot of different things that we have to handle, but I think it starts with getting the conservative movement united.
I agree. And in a nutshell, you're talking about going on offense. You're talking about opening up new fronts on the left. We do play quite a bit of defense, and going on the offense sounds like it sounds like the plan. But Congressman, it sounds like your lifestyle. You've been on offense your whole life. Talk to us about the challenges that you see. The battle lines are being drawn. Where are they?
Well, thanks, Tommy. Let me just say, it really is great to be in Texas. It really is. Now, I, of course, have the blessing that I woke up in my own bed about 40 miles from here. I get to live here all the time, but I'm glad to have all y'all here visiting. It's great to have you here. And I use that as a warm-up joke, kind of conversationally, but it really is actually great to be in Texas, right? People ask how you're doing. They say, well, usually my answer is a lot more positive when I'm here than when I'm in D.C. But look, I think something that's really important, this last Monday, obviously, we celebrated Memorial Day, and I spoke at an event in Boerne, Texas. There was a bunch of veterans there. There was a couple there who lost their son in 2013 in Afghanistan. Plane went down. And, we were talking, and they said, man, I just haven't been able to get up to Arlington National Cemetery. And they talked about COVID and other reasons why they couldn't get up there. And I don't know if you all know Emily Dominich, our friend Emily, who works in the leader's office. And Emily does the Honor Project. And so I said, hold on a second. So they said, hey, our son's buried in Section 60. Here's the number. Would you go visit? And I said, hold on. I called Emily. I said, Emily, where are you? She said, I'm in Section 60. And so she went over, she looked at the marker, she took a picture, I showed it to the mom, and the mom was obviously very emotional about it, and the dad too, and we're sitting there with those veterans and all that is sacrificed. Like this, that's who we are as Americans, right? And that's where we've got to get to. That's where we've got to go. And I have this in my pocket because it's my same blue blazer I wore on Monday, and I found this morning. And this is a quote that I used when I was talking about it, G.K. Chesterton. Courage is almost a contradiction in terms. It means a strong desire to live, taking the form of a readiness to die. We got to look deep into our souls and decide what we're going to fight for as Americans. I think the question we have to ask ourselves, it's not what the radical left is doing. They're insane. They're attacking everything we believe, we know it. We can go through the laundry list. Why do we need to? What are we going to do as conservatives in this room? What is our calling today? The question we have to ask ourselves is, are we free? Are we actually free? We talk about living in the greatest country in the history of the world. We talk about the great freedoms we have here. And of course we have great freedoms. And of course we cherish those freedoms. But are we free if our border is literally operated by cartels and that there are little girls being trafficked in human and sex trafficking up I-35, 30 miles from here right now as we speak? Are we free if ranchers are overrun? Are we free if we found 9 illegal immigrants in a car in Boerne, Texas, and San Antonio, heading to a stash house in Houston, Texas, to be sold into human and sex trafficking? Are we free? Are we free if the Reynosa faction of the Gulf Cartel, the cartel doing the rest there, are making $11 million a day, moving human beings for profit into our country on our watch? Are we free if fentanyl is pouring into our schools, into our communities, and we just say, well, I guess the border's broken? Are we free if you want to go see the doctor of your choice and you can't because an insurance bureaucrat, not just a government bureaucrat, an insurance bureaucrat or a government bureaucrat says you can't? And you call some 25-year-old in Omaha to find out whether your doctor's in network, whatever that means. Are we free if you can't get the health care of your choosing in supposedly the greatest country and freest country in the history of the world? And you can't. Are you free if you're spending $25,000 a year for your employer-provided insurance and what you're paying out of pocket, plus however many thousands of dollars for a deductible? And then you still have to go to the emergency room because it's the only place you can get care because everything's so broken down and you have to pay $600 for the care that you got in the emergency room because it doesn't count against your deductible. Are you free? Are you free if we have $30 trillion of debt and we just spent $6 trillion in a year blowing up our dollar, blowing up our economy, weakening our financial strength, all, by the way, to fund the very tyranny that is strangling our freedom? Are we free? Are we free if in Texas we're limited on our ability to frack and to go get energy? The very energy that's driving down CO2 levels and producing prosperity across the world while China and India pump crud into the air. But we're being told we can't do that by a faraway government in Washington? Are we free? I think these are the questions we have to ask. Are we free if small businesses, 100,000 of them, are shut down over the course of a year while Amazon makes $100 billion of additional profit? Are we free if our kids are running around in the corner of our schools wearing masks and frightened to death because a bureaucrat named Anthony Fauci makes up stuff and scares the hell out of the American people? Are we actually free? I would suggest to you that our calling as conservatives, gathered here now, is to set the terms of what we're going to accomplish in 22 and 24 and demand they get executed for the future of our kids and our grandkids. That is our calling. That's why we're here. And we are for the art of the possible. It is possible to secure our border. It is possible to have a strong national defense that is used sparingly but strongly. It is possible to have healthcare freedom and the doctor of your choice without having to check with those bureaucrats. It is possible to live within your means. It is possible to be able to have energy that is actually good for our environment but produces jobs and wealth and creation and productivity. It's possible to create economic growth like we should be without paying people not to work and driving up inflation through $6 trillion of spending. Let's talk about moonshots. Let's talk about the dreams of Americans. Let's talk about where we can go. Let's not talk about all the things that Washington is doing to us. Let's talk about the things that we're gonna do as Americans and that we're gonna say that we're gonna do for our kids and grandkids, and let's run right past Washington.
Well, Resource Bank, we promised you a challenge, and there it is. Are you free? Let's get specific. I mean, Congressman, you listed a lot of specific threats there, but we want to do challenge accepted. So let's talk about laying out those terms for 2022 and 2024. Let's start with election integrity. It's a two-front war, Congresswoman. The first front, in this country, we believe in federalism. We believe in the 10th Amendment. We believe the states run elections. And so on the one hand, we're trying to shore up, reform the election laws on the state level, and we're getting there in places like Georgia and Florida, and it'll pass this summer in Texas. But the other front is the Democrats want to take it over. They want the federal government to run. And H.R. 1 came through the House, and it has now stalled in the Senate. But a lot of us are living in fear of the day when Joe Manchin changes his mind and S1 passes. So how do we fight that? We'll start with you, Congressman. How do we fight that two-front war on election integrity?
Well, first I want to know what's in this cup, because you came up like Wallace and I came up here like Ric Flair, so we got two very different things going on here.
Well, it's a Black Rifle Company
That explains
cup, so we're good.
Okay. Election integrity. I have had this conversation with so many of my constituents, so many people across the state of Florida, really the country, and I make the comment that, listen, I represent North Central Florida. We got it right after doing it wrong. We know election integrity issues every which way. But I think we have to have a very honest conversation with the American people. When I talk about election integrity and H.R. 1 and what happened on January 6th, people need to really have that honest-to-God conversation, particularly as legislators with their constituents. And Chip and I voted differently. We're still friends. We still get along. But we approached that day and that vote very differently. But we need to have that honest conversation with our constituents about really what it meant when you took that vote, be it for or against. And in my case, I thought there was a clear violation of Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 and 3. And we have that discussion. But when you talk about election integrity, people are so angry, they're so frustrated, they feel like their vote doesn't count. And if we have Americans, if we have conservatives who sit there and say, well, I'm not going to go vote because my vote's not going to count, then what the hell are we doing? Every single legal ballot has to be counted, and every illegitimate vote needs to be tossed out. I don't think that can be disputed. But when you have constituents coming to you, and I know you have constituents because I have very conservative people who say, we need to do a full overhaul, we need to do this, 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 and this. I said, do you really want the federal government controlling your elections? Do you really understand what that means? And I think it stems from, one, a lack of education. People don't know the Constitution. They don't understand the reasons why we have the system, the republic that we do. And I point to the states, and they say, well, what are you doing to hold the states accountable? It's not what we in the federal government are doing. It's what the people in those states are doing to hold their state legislatures accountable. And we have to educate them and have those honest conversations that are uncomfortable, where you stand on that stage and you take the arrows and you take the bullets and you educate your constituents about it. If we are not willing to have that conversation and are focused more on the saucy tweets that say, I'm fighting for election integrity at the federal level and blah, 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 now send me $25, instead of actually having those conversations and building those relationships with our state legislatures, then we're doing it wrong. And I think that there are a lot of people in the movement today that are focused more on chasing a headline and getting a sexy statement out there to raise money than actually going back home and building those relationships and making sure that those protocols are in place. So I think it starts with making sure we have that relationship. I think what H.R. 1 will do is fundamentally change our republic as we know it. I think we all recognize that. But too often we're looking to Washington to fix problems that should be fixed here at home. And I think Texas is a great example. I think Florida is a great example. I know I'm biased. But we have an opportunity to really, really leverage the power of relationships and get it right before the midterms and get it right before 2024. Because if we don't, our people are going to stay home because they have bought into this notion that every single machine is bad and every county supervisor of election is corrupt. We can't let that happen, because if we give up, they win.
An honest conversation is not what is happening on the left in this country on this issue. Congressman, how do we inject that honesty into the mainstream discourse at our dinner tables?
Look, everything in our country revolves around a faith in a republic built on the back of the will of the people, right? And the power of the people, the consent of the governed. And so we've got to get back to that, right? The consent of the governed, and remind the American people how critically important that is. Let me be very clear. I mean, Kat, you should be bragging. You guys have moved through reforms for election reform, and Texas is not. I'm going to be a little harsh on my state right now. The legislature needs to get back in the Texas Capitol, and they need to pass election reform, and they need to do it now. It was absolutely, they're gonna pass reform because they know that they have to, but that's where it does need to take place. I agree. And let me just say one, on January 6th, Kat brought up a good point. Like, we can agree to disagree, right? I mean, there are times when Antonin Scalia and Clarence Thomas didn't join the same opinion. Now, they might 99% of the time, but it does occur. On January 6th, Mike Lee, Ted Cruz reached different views, right? I reached a different view than some of my colleagues in the House. The reason I reached the view I reached was actually what you just articulated, Kat, is I think this stuff needs to be, under our constitutional framework, coming from the states. When the states send electors to Washington, I want that to be fully dependent on what the states choose and what the states send to Washington. And so I thought that was what carried the day on January 6th. But that's what should be driving us right now. That's why back earlier this year I was talking about state election reform, why we need that. Need it in Florida, need it in Iowa, need it in Georgia, and we've gotten those passed, and we need it in Texas, and we're going to get it passed. What are we talking about? We're talking about ensuring that mail-in ballots aren't allowed to abuse our elections. And when you have in Georgia 300,000 mail-in ballots in one cycle, and the next cycle you have 1.3 million mail-in ballots, that's a problem systematically, right? That allows for fraud. Even the Baker-Carter Commission, bipartisan, 2005, said mail-in ballots, you have 1% to 2% higher propensity of fraud. Well, you just had 1 million more ballots. That means you had 10 to 20,000, even by that bipartisan math from 2005. It's real, right? I was the first assistant attorney general. We had to go prosecute these crimes. They're hard to go prosecute. They're hard to go prove. But when you go find one, you find multiple incidents that are attached to one incident, one individual that you're going after for harvesting ballots. But this is all stuff that we can fix. And it goes back to what I was saying to start with. We need the willpower to go fix it. That's it. It's pretty simple. We believe in the integrity of our elections. We want to go make sure that every ballot in America that is cast is believed to be accurate, true, and that nobody's vote is diluted by a fraudulent vote being cast. We go to the American people and say, your vote has to matter. And if you have a system that undermines that, then your vote no longer matters as much as it should. It gets diluted, it gets watered down, it becomes ineffective. But I'll close with one other thing. We need to pass all these election reforms, absolutely. But we also need to lead the American people and have them believe in a vision of conservative principles to carry our country forward in which it is not nearly close enough to steal an election or to have an election be in question. We need to win by capturing minds and hearts of the American people with our values and our beliefs and what they can do in federalism and limited government and freedom and the opportunity that you get in this country when you do that. We need to inspire people so that you don't have 50,000 votes determine a presidential election.
Well, there's some talk of the vote on January 6th, and I just want to say, from the perspective of the Heritage Foundation, both of these members searched the Constitution, searched the law, searched their hearts, and came to conclusions that they believed in regardless of the consequences that were going to come to do what they thought was the right thing. And I'll just say more of that in Congress would be welcome. Congratulations to both of you on that. Let's switch gears for a minute. You mentioned the border. Chaos, crisis, these are words that we've become numb to. But when you look at the videos and you look at the pictures, President Joe Biden has systematically reversed immigration enforcement and dismantled immigration law in this country. And that has precipitated an unfathomable event on the southern border. I'm afraid that the American people are they've heard about it for so many weeks that the urgency has gone out. And I look at these videos that are still coming in from trips to the border yesterday. And it is, one, it's heartbreaking. And two, in the United States of America, it's unfathomable. How do we fix it?
I'm going to get a little wild and crazy here. We secure the border.
Not you.
Now,
not wild and crazy from Chip Roy.
I mean, but this is the question, right? Like, people act like this is some complex question. Secure the border. That's it. That's the simple thing. Secure the border. How do you do that? Infrastructure, fencing, clearing cane, building roads, having enough border patrol to actually cover the border, not having catch and release, not having a broken asylum system, not having it to where you can't go use return to Mexico protocols, knocking the knees out from the cartels who have operational control of our border. These are all things we can do, and we can do so literally within about a week. We could just, within a week, we could pass a law that would fix asylum, fix catch and release. We could send a loud signal. We could start doing return to Mexico again. We could use Title 42 to stop the flow of people coming across the border who potentially have communicable diseases. We could immediately stop the flow. We could build infrastructure, and we could still have a system where we allow people to come in to the greatest country in the history of the world. We could do that right now. But you know who one of the biggest obstacles has been to all of that? Republicans. Do you know who else has been an obstacle to that? The Chamber of Commerce. Big business. They love to sit on the Rio Grande, and they like to say no trespassing, and then they go wink, wink, and they hold the help wanted sign over here. Right? It's bad for immigrants, bad for America, bad for Texas, bad for our schools, bad for our healthcare system, bad for everybody to have a broken border. And right now, the cartel del Noreste and the Reynosa faction of the Gulf Cartel have operational control of your border from the Gulf of Mexico to Big Bend. We have mountains of fentanyl pouring into our country. More fentanyl poured into our country in the first 4 months of this year than in all of last year. These cartels are making tens of millions of dollars a day moving human beings for profit. Little girls, when I went down to McAllen, I go to the border all the time. When I went down to McAllen about a month ago, and I sat down on the Rio Grande well into the middle of the night by myself and with a couple staffers, just driving around my truck along the river, I met with about 50 migrants who came across the river. Spoke to them in my broken but functional Spanish. There was a little girl there. I've got a picture of her on my phone right now. 7 years old, had a phone number written on her arm. She was from, I think, Honduras. By herself. No mom, no dad, no uncle, no aunt, no brother, no sister. There was a 12 or 13-year-old boy who, I said, where'd you find her? He's in the middle of Mexico. This is what we're doing in the name of compassion? This is what we're doing in saying that, oh, look at us, Democrats, aren't we great? We're pro-immigrant. When 20 to 25 to 30%, depending on what stats you look at, of the women are abused on the journey, the greatest country in the history of the world, we allow that to happen in the name of compassion of people coming to our country. We allow our ranchers in South Texas to get overrun. I've gotten pictures sent to me from ranchers where you see a girl going across the ranch with her hands bound behind her back, walking with other folks in the journey. We find mass graves on the other side of the river at the hands of cartels. We find people that are locked into bars and the things lit on fire with dozens of people in there by these ruthless cartels, people hanging from bridges. We have people that are being held for ransom, and then you'll talk to a migrant over here who says, yeah, well, the cartel said they'll kill my uncle or aunt or my husband or my boyfriend if I don't follow their orders. The young man in Boerne, Texas, who paid $4,000 to that cartel to come here to pick grapes in California, but was being shipped to that stash house in Houston that I described a minute ago. We should stop that immediately. Immediately, right now. We should go down, we should secure the border, stop the foolish policies that's allowing that to occur, and save the lives of Americans, save the lives of migrants, make a stronger Mexico, a stronger Central America, a stronger Western Hemisphere, push back on China in the process. If you wanted to come up with policies that are the exact opposite of what we should do as a free nation, follow the Biden administration. And all I can say about Kamala Harris is I hope she's effective at H.R. 1 as she's been at securing the border.
We're guilty. We're complicit in that scenario on the border.
You know, I took a little heat for it, and I don't mind it at all, because right now I believe that every town in America is a border town. I don't care if you're Cleveland, I don't care if you're Miami, New York, if you are Castle Rock, Colorado, you are a border town, because what is happening here on the southwest border is affecting every single community in the United States. I'll give you an example. My husband, he's a first responder. He is a firefighter and a SWAT medic. So he is going to the homes of people that are overdosing on the very drugs that are being transported across the border openly, freely. And this latest cocktail that they have put together that is hot right now, it is a mixture of fentanyl and heroin. In 1 week, my husband responded to the same guy. And when they did an investigation, it all got tracked back to a dealer that has been trafficking drugs across the border. This is happening in Gainesville, Florida. So we started, much like what you said, you know, there's a bit of fatigue. We keep talking about the border. We keep talking about the border. And let's be honest, we live in a time where we have a very short attention span. We'll be outraged for a hot minute, but then it's like, okay, what's next? What can I binge watch on Netflix, right? It's very short. So we got to thinking, how can we really drive home the fact that this is a crisis in every single community in America? I'm taking my elected sheriffs to the border next month because I want them to see firsthand what I have been seeing on all of my trips. I want them to see the little kids, like what you said. My very first trip to McAllen, Texas, I met a 9-year-old girl who couldn't even tell me her name because her vocal cords had given out from screaming while she was being gang raped. True story. I get text messages probably every other day from Border Patrol agents. And it's, of course, they do this because they have confidence that I'm not going to, share their name and put it out there. But they text me and they say, I came across another girl. She gave birth to twins right there on the river. She's 14 years old. Or we picked up a little kid who was beaten so badly that we can't even do any sort of facial recognition or anything. They have been maimed to that point. And I think one of the things that has stuck with me is when we were at the legal port of entry, the FAR International Bridge. You know where that's at? I'm standing in the back of a semi, and I'm pretty upset about the fact that There's all these tomatoes coming in. I represent a state that feeds 140 million Americans every year. But because of the produce that is coming across freely, typically with narcotics in that shipment being subsidized by the cartels, and USDA doesn't even have enough agents on the ground, so they're using interns to inspect this produce coming across. It's a whole nother issue. But as I'm standing in the back of this semi-truck, we're noticing that the edges don't look right of the floor. They were epoxied. And as I'm standing on this, they're like, hey, grab the drill. They drill into the floor. Weed pops up. They send it through the X-ray machine. That one truck that I just happened to be standing on had 8 inches of a false bottom that was nothing but meth and weed. Now keep in mind, there are 2,500 trucks every single day, 7 days a week, on average, coming through that one port of entry. There are 9 legal ports of entry for commercial trucks in the state of Texas alone. 20% are inspected. You think we have a problem? If I'm a cartel member, it's a numbers game. I'm gonna send 10 trucks knowing that 2 are probably gonna get popped. The drugs are killing us. And I have called Biden the trafficker in chief. I've said that publicly because we are complicit in completing the trafficking ring that the cartels have established. They know our laws and our systems better than we do, and they use it to their advantage. And something else that really, really is troublesome when we talk about big tech and the issues that we're facing. I challenge any of you, pull out your phone, open up your Facebook app, and type in Cruzando la Frontera or Viaje Estados Unidos. You're gonna find ads from the cartels that have paid Facebook to then get people from Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Guatemala, and they complete the transaction using these social media platforms. I had the ambassador of Honduras in my office not too long ago, and he came to me and said, I need help. The narco-terrorists are using WhatsApp to basically overrun our government. This is what we're up against. So Facebook is taking a step back, allowing the cartels to put advertisements, but heaven forbid if you post yourself in a MAGA hat or you say something that is in the conservative lane, you can't put advertisements on social media, but the cartels are okay. Where's the outrage about that? Where are we when we should be flagging this and demanding answers? I'm with Chip on all the things that we need to do, reinstating the MPP policy, securing the border, giving resources to our Border Patrol agents, extending Title 42, you name it, we need to do it. But we have to maintain a consistent level of outrage, because if we don't have a secure border, we don't have a secure nation. And the federal government's job is national security. We have got to get very serious about this.
I'll just add one thing. Yeah, agreed. I would just add that when we talk about the numbers and the sheer volume that Kat was just referring to, I mean, I didn't get into all the stuff, right? I mean, the 600,000 apprehensions, the 300,000 gotaways and releases. I mean, the volume is extraordinary. It's June, let's say June 1 or 2, whatever today is, June 2. So we should get the May numbers here shortly. But they're going to be similar to the April numbers, which were 178,000 apprehensions. Y'all, this is accelerating. It's accelerating. And Kat is right. If we're going to be a sovereign nation, it's our job to secure it. And this is why I get to my point. When I said we could do it, it's not going to be done by this administration. So this needs to be front and center for 2022, but it needs to be front and center today here in Texas. Governor Abbott issued an emergency declaration yesterday. All right, great. Now let's go figure out how we can do to execute on that, but Texas is going to have to start figuring out how to secure its border, because it's not just America's border, it's Texas's border, and Texas needs to stand up and secure our border.
I feel like we brought it way down.
No, these are the stakes. Freedom is in peril. These are the stakes. And we're not just hearing from these two tremendous leaders this morning, folks, that things are dire. We're not just hearing that there is a humanitarian crisis that breaks each and every one of our hearts happening on the border this morning. We're not just hearing that we could lose our republic to H.R. 1 and S1, but we're also hearing, and I want to be crystal clear about this, we're hearing that we in this room have the power to do something about it, that we in this room can, and if you can, you must win these battles across these battle lines that are being drawn this morning. We haven't gotten yet past election integrity and immigration to the other threats and challenges that exist. China, you mentioned big tech. The spending that is going to precipitate an inflationary crisis that is going to break all of our family budgets. The list goes on and on. I'll just give each of you a chance to comment on the other challenges that are out there, and then we'll take a couple of questions from the audience. We'll start with you, Congressman.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, you should tell me a joke or maybe give me a tip on hairstyles or something, because I feel like we really brought it down with the border talk.
My hairstyle's easy.
So I shouldn't ask you for a comb or hairspray. Okay. So challenges. I mean, again, we have so many fronts that have been opened up on us that we have to tackle. And it's education, it's China, it is, I mean, the spending. And one of the things, and I'm going to ask you all, because you are the power brokers here. And I am going to ask a favor of you. When we talk about these issues, we already are at a disadvantage because we're using the very same terms and definitions that the left uses. I'll give you an example. I saw a video, and I won't attribute it to any group, but it was about gun control, and it was about preserving our Second Amendment rights. And they were talking about violence, but the symbol that they kept using for violence was a gun. And I sat back and I thought, why in the heck are we basically making the case for them that when we talk about violence, it automatically equates to a gun? And so my ask to you is, let's strip the left of the terms that they use. Stop letting them determine the definitions and the terms that we use when we talk about these issues, because that's really how they're winning. They're setting the narrative. They're setting the tone. And when we use those same words, we feed right into that narrative. We're already playing from behind. The other thing I'll say is, amid all of these challenges, and it's incredibly true, we have so many, and you talk about freedom. Are we really free? I can speak from the millennial and Gen Z standpoint. We don't really know what freedom is. We don't know. You can't talk about freedom to a generation that really never knew what it was like pre-9/11. We have kids graduating college that weren't alive when 9/11 happened. We have not seen that slide over the decades that others have. So again, it goes back to telling the story. And for the group here today, I would say one way that we can all work together, because I'm very big on a united front. Teamwork makes the dream work. We need to engage with members where they are. I like to say that there's 3 types of Republicans. And I know I'm new. I'm 5 months in on the job, 6 if you count the first 2 days in June. But there's 3 types of Republicans, and we need every single type. But knowing and engaging with that particular type of Republican in a way that is meaningful and matters is how we're actually going to be able to leverage every single member's talents. You got your broadcasters. You see them on Fox News 24/7. They will never pass a bill. God bless them. We love them. But they are the rally, get the troops fired up, and we need them. They are the storytellers. They communicate with the masses in ways that others can't. Then you've got your architects. Most of us in this room will never, ever be able to pick them out of a lineup or in a grocery store, ever. But they are so important. They are the ones that are up all night. The policy wonks, they will build the most incredible pieces of legislation in the world, and you'll never know their names. And then you have brokers. Your brokers do a little bit of both, but the most important thing that they do is that they build relationships. And they build the relationships between the broadcasters and the architects. And everybody has a lane. I guarantee you start thinking about members, you're going to start seeing which one falls into which category. And as the groups, the power brokers that you all are with your memberships behind you, you can engage with each of these members and leverage the talents that they have. And that's how we're going to win the House back. And I'll let Chip decide which one he is.
Well, look, I know we want to get to Q&A, so I'll try to keep it quick, Tommy. 12 years ago, we were pretty despondent as conservatives in reaction to the Obama, coming to power. and then dealing with all of the shovel-ready projects, Obamacare, and all the things that we were facing. But then what happened? I mean, this is where we get positive as a conservative movement, right? You had a Tea Party awakening. We demanded as an American people, okay? Remember, there was marching in Washington. We demanded as American people that we wanted constraints on spending, that we wanted Washington to do things the right way. And that Tea Party was born, and it formed this sort of movement that has been growing over the last decade. What happened? In 2010, we got Mike Lee in Utah instead of Bob Bennett, an establishment Republican. We got Marco Rubio instead of Charlie Crist, who was the NRCC preferred candidate, who is now a Democrat. Right? We got Rand Paul in Kentucky. In 2012, we got Ted Cruz instead of David Dewhurst. Right? What then happened? I went to Washington as Ted's chief of staff. What did? We went and we tried to fight health care. Ted filibustered on the floor. We were conspiring in the basement of Tortilla Coast over on the House side with a group of about 8 House members. Guess what? That was the nucleus of the Freedom Caucus. What happened? The Freedom Caucus was then born. It's now 40 members strong. Then what happened in 2016? Donald Trump is elected, and he runs against the swamp. He runs against Washington, all building on that movement. It was all part of that same movement because conservatives were fighting. Conservatives were standing up on principle. Conservatives were taking on the establishment and the swamp in Washington. And the president got in, and then he led. And then what did we see? We moved the embassy to Jerusalem. We have historic Middle East peace. We have great judges. We have regulations and tax policy that created economic growth, and it was unprecedented. We have strong border security. We have a lot of policies in place that we all believed in and agreed with. And now here we sit, and it's kind of a little bit like 2009. And now our job is to carry that movement forward. And it's our job is to make 2022 and 2024 finish this job, that we're going to take our country back. Because we can. We have all the tools. And with all due respect, because we're here, this is a think tank, it's Heritage, we've got all the ideas. I don't know how many more white papers we need. I'm just going to be honest with you. We need the willpower to carry them out. We need the willpower to stand up and fight for the freedom for our kids and grandkids to have the America that they deserve, to be able to live free, to be able to answer those questions that are we free? Yes, sir, I'm free. And that is our calling, I think, coming out of this.
We have time for maybe 1, 2, if the first one's very quick, questions from the audience. Yes, sir, right here in the middle.
Voter ID card for the entire country, and many conservatives don't like the idea of the government having an overarching control of something like that. We've got a social security number. We all live with that. Why not a national voter ID card?
A national voter ID card.
So, look, so the question I think people heard with the microphone there at the end is whether we should have a national voter ID card. Look, I'm going to say what's not going to surprise you. I do not want to empower Washington to be able to tell me in Texas how we're going to set our elections. And I understand the argument. I understand that we're then impacted by what occurs in other states in terms of how the president's selected. This goes a little bit to the heart of my position on January 6th. Look, Pennsylvania wants to send electors because they throw darts at a dartboard. In my view, in a federalist system, I want states to be able to figure out how they want to send their electors to Washington. I want Texas to be free and clear from Nancy Pelosi ever telling me how we're going to choose how we're governed and how we choose our electors. And so I'm going to stand up in defense of Texas setting those, and I believe and trust the 50 states to rationally figure out how they're going to send the electors to Washington, and I want to control elections here in Texas. I think there's a lot of things we can do to improve voter identification. We're doing that here in Texas. I think that when we do pass the reforms, which we'll pass presumably in the next few weeks, I hope, they're going to have strong voter ID requirements, not just for in-person voting, but for mail-in ballots, strong use of how mail-in ballots is actually used, going back to the way it, I think, was designed to be used, ensuring that we've got our systems in place the way they should be. So I'd like to leave that at the state level primarily.
You think, Dad?
Ditto.
One more question? Yes, sir.
I don't have as strong a voice as Preston. My name's Jeremiah Lorig with Generation Joshua, and I work with high schoolers in regards to teaching them about the principles of citizenship. And you mentioned earlier, one of the things that we need to teach them is freedom, and I think that's key, and that's one of the main things we focus on. The biggest struggle, though, is economic freedom. Do you have a story or an example that you think really highlights the value of economic freedom that I can share with high schoolers across the country?
You want to start? Why don't you start? I took the first one.
Yeah, so one of the things that I do when I talk to kids, and I go to the middle schools and the high schools, again, it goes back to putting things in ways and terms that people can understand. You meet them on their level. If I have to hear another politician go tell a high school class why $30 trillion in debt is bad for them, I'm going to gouge my eyeballs out. I'm serious. We are way too inside our heads. I remember very vividly going to a middle school not too long ago, and I had noticed that the majority of the boys were wearing Jordans. They were wearing these really, really fancy Jordans. And I did a quick search. I'm like, oh, $360 a pop. Okay. So I did the math real fast on my phone. And I'm like, if you had the ability to buy 387 pairs of Jordans, what would that mean to you? They're like, holy smokes, oh my God. They can visualize that. I said, that is exactly what you owe the federal government. And their heads just exploded and their eyes turned to saucers. And when I talk to young families that are getting ready to buy their first house or they're having their first kid, I'm like, this is your down payment on our house. This is that F-150. You meet them where they are in their life. So we have to tell the story of why the economics matter. It's not enough for us to say we're garnishing the wages of our kids and our grandkids. We have got to start telling the stories about why the economics and the economic health of our country is so important to them. What does the deficit mean to them? And I'll tell you, for the high schoolers that are just getting their first jobs, I can't tell you how many of them ask me who FICA is. And I love that. And I tell people all the time, the worst thing that we ever did was automatic deductions. I would love for people to have to actually write that check to the government so that they know how much the government is stealing from them. Honestly, we have got to start educating them about what that paycheck means and what all is in it. And I think that is really, again, going back to the storytelling, making it matter in a way that meets them at their level. That's where we need to go with this. And I'll give the last 5 seconds to Chip.
Yeah, and I know we're going to want to move on. I don't want to delay the other panels. I think that is an important question, and good for you for working with Generation Joshua. Great organization. But look, I look no further than right now. I represent the most restaurants of any district in Texas, okay? And we've got a lot of hospitality. We've got a lot of live music venues, Austin, San Antonio, the Hill Country, very blessed. But they got hammered over the last year. They got absolutely hammered. And we have great institutions that are closing, places that are part of the fabric of our community, right? The places you go, the place you go to have a beer, the place you go to interact with others, right? I mean, and I think when you talk about stories, like just show them, walk around, go look at the help wanted signs, right? You can't click on a website without seeing a help wanted thing pop up. You can't go to a restaurant. You can't go to a venue. You can't drive down the road without seeing help wanted signs everywhere. Yet we're paying people more not to work than to work. And explain to them what that's doing with respect to inflation, with what that's doing with respect to the inability for the rest of the economy to function. When you put the federal government in the mix and you start pumping out $6 trillion and you start shutting down small businesses through the tyranny of the NIH and CDC and all these bureaucrats, look what the impact is on real lives, real people, human beings, businesses in our communities that make up our lives. These are the people we go to church with, our kids go to school with. There's your story. We're living that story right now. And we're going to, look, that wall, it's coming to us, okay? Like, they're going to be coming to us going, wait a minute, why is lumber up 400%? Why is a sheet of plywood now $112? I went and got 2x4s the other day. They were like $10. They used to be $2.80, right? I mean, this is real. People are starting to feel it, and they're going to be aggravated about it. Our job is to take that and drive forward and get the American people right behind us to take this country forward.
Well, you inspired me.
Reclaiming her time.
I'm reclaiming. Well, you yield back. You inspired me, Chip. You asked about how we communicate economic issues to young people. I think it's much simpler than what us two are trying to communicate. I think you asked them, would they rather have equal opportunity or equal outcome? I think you put that in their hands and ask them, would they rather have the opportunity to do anything that they want to do, that they can dream up, or despite how hard they work, they still get as much or as little as the next person, regardless of how much that person wants to do. Equal opportunity versus equal outcome. I think that's how we message to that next generation.
Would you all join me in thanking these two tremendous leaders?
Thanks for watching the Heritage Foundation's YouTube channel. With more than 500,000 members, we are the nation's largest conservative research and education institution. We believe the principles and ideas of the American founding are worth conserving and renewing. Please help us further our mission by subscribing to this channel and sharing our videos with your family and friends.